Hi everyone, it's Jeanette here from the Sewing Studio with block 7. Now you'll be very familiar with the technique for this because this is very similar to block 6. We're just going to do slightly different colour placement. So sizes I think are exactly the same as well. So we're embedding what we learnt for the previous one in block 6. So I'm just going to quickly run through the fabrics. So we've got our 6-inch squares here again. Now I've got 2 in background, 1 in 1B, which is my brown script, and 1 in 3B, which is my pink script. So they're going to be our quarter square triangles again, which make our hourglass blocks. Then we're going to do our half square triangles again, now for me this time, and they're 5-inch squares. I've got 2 in background and 2 of 3A. So for me, that's the pink floral. And then our centre square, once again, is 4.5 inches. So we'll go through this, but like I say, it will be very similar or exactly the same in terms of the technique that we did in block 6, but colour placement, we just have to watch colour placement. So we don't have to do anything to our centre square, that's already made. So I'm going to start again with our half square triangles. So we're going to do the technique where we're going to draw a diagonal line on the back of both of our background squares, and then we're going to do our scant, so slightly narrower than 1/4 inch on both of these. So once again, we're going to cut on that drawn line. Take them to the iron, press them open, and then trim them down to 4.5 inches. Okay, so in case you haven't seen this before, I've got my rotating cutting mat out this time actually. Because when I was making the last block, I thought actually it would make it a bit easier if I had the rotating cutting mat. So I'm going to line up my diagonal line on my half square triangle onto the seam, and I'm going to look to make sure I've got 4.5 inches all the way around, and just do a little bit of a trim. Tiny bit is needed there, and then I can rotate that around and do the other 2 sides, now lining up my 4.5 inch lines on the outside and my diagonal line on the seam. So there it is. So I'm going to do the same for the other 3 blocks. Now you could, if you want, because we're going to, after we made the quarter square triangles like we did in block 6, we also need to square up those to 4.5 inches. So if you prefer, you could make all your units and then square it all up. But I'm just going to sort of do it as I go. So we've got all of those cut. Now I should just say I'm using the Alpha cutting mat. It's one, we sell a couple of different cutting mats here, and it's one of the cutting mats we sell here, and I really like it. It's nice and stable. I've got a cutting mat at home which I very rarely use because it tends to sort of move about on me a little bit when I'm trimming, but this one I really like. So just wanted to say that in case anybody's out there going, oh, I wonder what cutting mat that is. Right, so we're going to do the same now for our quarter square triangles. So like we did in block 6, we're going to start by making half square triangles. Now on this one, let me just bring the graphic in because it's a little bit different colour placement wise. So this time we need to put a background with our 1B, so for me that's my brown fabric, and then a background with my 3B. So I think last time we had 2 colours that went together and a background and a colour that went together. So this time, as I said, slightly different. So once again, we're going to draw our lines on the back of our background fabrics. And then we're going to pair them up with one of each of the, I'm going to pin this time just to help hold those slightly larger pieces together. And we're going to do our scant 1/4 inch either side of the line on both of them. So we're going to cut them apart, press them open, but we don't need to square up yet. We've got another step before we square up. So we're going to put these together again to do our hourglass blocks. So if we have a look at the diagram, you can see we've got the colour opposite the colour and the background opposite the background. So we just need to place background onto colour, colour onto background. And then that will put those fabrics in the right positions. So I'm just going to nest those seams there. If you want to put a pin in the centre there, you can, but do that. We're going to draw a line, so do it after you've drawn the line. But what I tend to do is as I'm sewing, I just check that that seam there is sort of nested as I get to it, because that's going to be the middle of our hourglass block or our quarter square triangles. It's an hourglass block made up of quarter square triangles. I should explain why I'm calling them two things. So I've pinned those seams and we're now going to draw a diagonal line that dissects that. Now you can see there that fabric's a little bit off. I'm going to move it a little bit, but I'm not going to worry too much because there's actually quite a lot of extra fabric here to trim away. So I've given you a little bit of wiggle room on that. So once again, we're going to do a scant 1/4 inch either side of the line. So we can cut these apart now. So I'm cutting on that drawn line. I'm going to check I'm happy with how they've all come out. And you can see there, if I put that there, we've got everything coming together nicely in the centre. This is a nice way to make hourglass blocks. Yep. Yep. So let's give those a press. I'm going to trim all of these down now to 4.5 inches. Now, in case you haven't seen block 6, I will just explain a little bit about trimming down hourglass blocks because it's a little bit different than the half square triangles, because we need to make sure we take equal amounts off so that we don't end up with one side smaller than the other, if that makes sense. So what I'm going to do is find the centre, because we need to trim to 4.5, so half of 4.5 is 2.25. So we need to make sure we put a 2.25 inch mark on our ruler, which is here on mine. So I'm 2.5 and then going back 1/4. So the 45-degree line is still following that seam, but right at that point there in the middle where all of our fabrics come together, I'm looking for 2.25. So I've got 2.25 coming in from that way and also 2.25 coming down from that way. So that's my 2.5 inch mark on the line. So we can trim, rotate, and this is definitely measure twice, cut once. So now 4.5, and I'm checking that my 2.25 is still coming out right at that centre point, and it is. So now I can trim my other two sides. So now we've got a trimmed block which all the pieces have stayed even. So I'm going to do that for the other 3, and then it will be time to put the block together. So all the component bits are done. We've got our 4 hourglass blocks trimmed to 4.5, our 4 half square triangles trimmed to 4.5, and our centre square also at 4.5. So now I'm going to refer to our little layout diagram, and you can see here we want our centre square and then our quarter square triangles. For me, the brown fabric, which is my 1B, all touches that centre square. And then this time, on this block, our print fabric faces in towards the block. So there we have it. This time the star legs are being made up from the background. So we've got the star in reverse, if you like. So we're going to put it together as a 9 patch like we've done previously. My method is always right on to left. And that seam does, I've pressed towards that pink there, and that seam should nest. That one, there's no seams to match anything. Let's get a couple of pins out while I'm here. And then this one will have a seam that nests at the bottom of the block but not at the top, so we'll just make sure that that happens. So actually let's pin it while we're pinning. So just here at the bottom, I'm just going to rub those seams together to get them to nest into each other nicely. Take that to the machine with these 3 blocks. So I'm going to do the vertical rows first, and then I'm going to put them together horizontally with the horizontal rows. So now also to say, because we've been using scant 1/4 inches up to this point, we want our normal 1/4 inch now, our accurate 1/4 inch. So there's our block. I'm going to give it a press. So there's the block. Block number 7. So there it all is. Like I say, very similar to block number 6, just that colour placement's a little bit different. Techniques exactly the same. So hopefully if you've got block 6 under your belt, you can definitely do block 7. So thank you for your time today. As always, if you've got any queries, questions, comments, please leave them below and we'll pick them up and endeavour to answer them in future videos. Thank you for spending some time with me here today, and I hope you'll join us again here next time in the sewing studio.